So, John, it's a big event this month.
So I believe.
Well, we're all celebrating. I hope you are too. You're turning 80.
Yes, I believe so.
I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to sit down and just ask you to reflect a bit on your life and your story, of God's hand in all that you've done and all that you're continuing to do. So maybe we could just start there. Can you tell us a bit of your story?
Yeah, I came into the world, I think at 6:13 p.m. on the 7th of November 1943, just towards the end of the war, in a hospital in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I was not expected to live very long. My mother had lost two before me. And found myself in the world in a wonderful, caring Christian family. They loved me enough not to shove their strong Christian convictions down my throat, but encouraged me to read very widely. So when I was growing up, Christianity was mind expanding. It was in no sense bigoted or narrow. And to really get that point across, I think my father presented me when I was about 14 with a book, and he said, "You better read this." And I said, "Have you?" He said, "No." "What is it?" "It's the Communist Manifesto." "Well, if you haven't read it, why should I read it?" He said, "You need to know what other people think." And that was the kind of atmosphere in which I grew up, and it was enormously positive.
So you went up to Cambridge as a mathematician. Tell us a bit about how your academic career flourished, as well as how you continued to explore your faith.
Something more important than that, because I was met in Cambridge by a friend of the aforementioned David Gooding, and he had laconically, in his strange biblical way that he did for fun, said, "There is a man in Cambridge, John, with 4 daughters." And they took me to church on day 2, and I saw these 4, 3, 2, 1 blonde girls, and I chose the first one. And I've been married to her for 55 odd years. So that was day 2. And then I started mathematics on day 3. I discovered, of course, I was good at school and all the rest of it, but it was a different thing being amongst the brightest and the best. And it was hard work. There were some people who seemed to sail through doing very little work, but I had to work very hard at it. I had decided and was firmly convinced that Christianity was true. And therefore, I was going to do mathematics, do it for the Lord as best I could, but I wasn't going to sell my soul for it. And I was going to be uncompromising, but as politely as I could. And I remember going to what was advertised as a squash, they don't use that word anymore, which was put on by the college to introduce people to Christianity. I don't remember what it was I took exception to in the talk. I thought it was a very thin presentation of Christianity, so I criticised it. The result of which was I made a whole group of non-Christian friends on day 1. And I very rapidly got actively involved in sharing my faith and talking to people because of a challenge that happened very early.
Eastern Europe is once again in the news, and it's something that many of us are concerned about. But you've gone there multiple times. How did that come about?
So it was Hungary, East Germany principally, and Poland were the 3 countries I concentrated on and went many times during the Cold War to teach Scripture.
But I can't imagine it was very easy to get in to teach Scripture.
Well, you see, other people smuggled Bibles. I didn't. I smuggled myself. And the Christians told me, "Don't bring any literature." And I was often stopped. They really harassed me. I mean, I was spied on, I was tape recorded secretly and all this, and that scared people. I tried in the early days to bring people with me, and they got too scared, and I was going my own. It was crazy. And one incident really stands out when I was at the Berlin Wall on the other side, and I used to go there often and talk to the people, a group of leather-jacketed young people. And we were talking about ideologies and worldviews and all this kind of thing. And I'll never forget this young man. He ripped open his jacket and he said, "That's my ideology." And across his T-shirt was, "Jesus Christus ist Herr," Jesus Christ is Lord. Now, he had no idea who I was. I could have been a plant, I could have been anything. And I thought, that's real courage. And another person in the same place whom I was talking about who said, you people are lucky, you've got your passports. I'd love to visit my granny who's over there in the lights of West Berlin. And he said, I mentioned Christianity. Oh, Christianity. He said, there's nothing in that. I said, why not? He said, look, he said, we're communists. It's a worldview. We've got a philosophy of history, a philosophy of work, a philosophy of economics, a philosophy of everything. And what have you got? An hour on a Sunday? You don't have a philosophy that covers anything. And I remember thinking, gosh, that is such a description of so many Christians, sadly, that it's not even a worldview. Those are two very big lessons. One, encourage, and the other, make sure your Christianity covers the whole of life.
You're probably best known for your public debates with well-known atheists. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about what you learned from the experience, or perhaps what you've learned from engaging with some of these, real heavyweight thinkers and commentators and arguers.
I remember reading through the book of Acts and thinking, when Paul stood up on trial in that kind of forensic situation, which was really dialogue and debate, Christianity was on trial in him. And that makes it a huge responsibility to try to get it right. And these confrontational debates are very difficult, Charlie, because you get 10 minutes, say, to state your piece, they get 10, and then you've 5 to come back at 5, and so on. That's hard to do. Although in the Alabama debate it was slightly different. We got a high court judge, one of the top judges in the country, very nice man, and he read out 6 theses from Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. The idea was to debate those. Well, it went wrong because in the background there was a radio station pushing, which it shouldn't have done, and cutting the time short. And we'd been told at the beginning that whatever else happened, at the end we'd each have 9 minutes to sum up. We were suddenly told from the front, you've got 2 minutes left to wrap up and finish. And it was at that point that I decided that I'd have to go for the central thing at Christianity. And I mentioned the resurrection. And the reaction was just unforgettable and made a deep impact on everybody, where Dawkins says, we've been talking about science, all these great ideas and so on, and now we come down to the resurrection of Jesus. How pathetic, he said. How unworthy of the universe, and all this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, if Jesus rose from the dead, the question is not if that's unworthy of the universe, but is the universe worthy of it?
Yeah. Thanks so much, John. I'm aware that we've just been filming a series, an album, The Best of Professor John Lennox, because obviously you've got a life of Bible teaching and of interacting and explaining that Christian worldview. I'm really struck by also what you've shared about how it's actually not just an intellectual thing. It's not just about arguments. It's not just about information. It is actually something that is fundamentally kind of spiritual and moral. And so when people are discussing atheism, for you, you're thinking, I know where this goes. This isn't just an interesting debate.
And it's not only those, it's relation as well. I often say to people, God is not a theory, he's a person. And he's revealed himself to us in a person. And the biggest issue is how I'm related to him. That's the key.
Thank you so much. Well, John, you might be turning 80, but I'm sure we haven't heard the last of you. At least 2 books in the pipeline. I'm sure many others being written before breakfast. Thank you for your time.
Not at all. My pleasure to be with you.
And happy birthday.
Thank you.